So last week we looked at the 120 ST, the street version of the 120 cubic inch twin cam engine. But this week we're going to dive into the 120R. This is the race version of the 120 inch twin cam engine. This is also the biggest, baddest twin cam engine Harley-Davidson has ever released. The 120R is basically the same engine as the 120 ST, but the 120R gets a much more aggressive cam in the Screamin Eagle 266E cam. And the street version got a milder version, which was the 259E cam. Being the race version, the 120R is also upgraded with a billet cam plate and a high volume oil pump to handle that extra horsepower that comes with it. We'll take a look at the specs on the 120R before we go to the dyno charts, but essentially these are the only mechanical differences between the 120R and the 120 ST. Now, while the 120R is the same price as the 120 ST, you're going to have to provide your own induction system with this engine. You'll need to at least purchase a 58mm throttle body and high flow injectors, or else you're really going to be hurting the horsepower that this engine is capable of producing. Being intended for a race use engine, I'll show you why a little later in the video, why they don't include an induction system with this engine. But let's take a look at the specs on the 120R, and I'll show you the differences there compared to the 120 ST. Like I said, they're basically the same engine. The 120R is built with some of the finest components that Harley-Davidson offers through their Screamin Eagle line. It comes with the 4.060 inch big bore cylinders, the 4 5/8 Screamin Eagle Pro Stroker crank assembly, 10.5:1 compression pistons with titanium rings. As I mentioned earlier, it has the 266E high lift cam. It has the CNC maximum velocity area heads, Timken cam bearings, high output Screamin Eagle lefty bearing for the output shaft, the high volume oil pump, and the billet cam plate. With a quality aftermarket exhaust system and a good tune, this engine is capable of producing 135 horsepower at the rear wheels, as well as 135 foot-pounds of torque. That's some very impressive power and torque for a twin cam engine. Now, as I mentioned in the 120 ST video, even with that milder cam and an aftermarket exhaust system, that engine could produce roughly 120 horsepower, and I think this shows you. And looking at the 120R with just the same specs and a little more aggressive cam in it, producing 135 with an aftermarket exhaust, I think you could see how the 120 ST could actually do 120 horsepower, maybe even a little better. Now, you could upgrade your 120 ST to the specs of the 120R pretty easily, just by changing out the camshaft, the cam plate, and the high volume oil pump. Now, if 135 rear wheel horsepower just isn't enough for you, you can take it even further with the Screamin Eagle Pro RX Race Kit. Now, this is where things really start to get really wild and a little off the chain here. This kit is not cheap at an additional $2,699, but this kit adds Hurricane CNC oval ported cylinder heads, 12:1 compression pistons, RX 267 cam kit, adjustable push rods, a 62mm cable throttle body or a 64mm electronic throttle body, high flow oval port manifold, high flow injectors, and a heavy breather air cleaner. This kit is capable of over 145 rear wheel horsepower. With the right exhaust and a careful tuning, you might even push 160 with this. So if you wanted to, you could really go wild with a 120R or a 120 ST because they're essentially the same engine. So this 120RX kit, this race kit, it would fit on a 120 ST. So now we can see why the 120R doesn't come with an induction system, because you can add this with the race kit, or you could buy that 64mm throttle body and the injectors on your own if you wanted to. That's just if the 58mm wasn't enough for you. Now, the 120R is available to fit any twin cam Dyna, Softail, or touring model. And at 135 horsepower, that's enough power to get the front wheel up on your touring bike. These are some big horsepower numbers for the track and especially on the street. But let's be honest, more of these engines are in use on the street than were ever put on a racetrack. Now, the 120R has a very high lift cam in it that was meant to go from 0 to wide open throttle and be shut back off again. And as you can see by the dyno chart, the power comes on almost immediately. And if you look at the RPM, that's close to the RPM range if you're racing, you're going to be launching in. So with this high lift cam, It might cause some mannerisms in the 120 engine that you may not be too comfortable with on the street. That all depends on the rider though. I mean, it really depends on your riding style, and if you like that, I mean, leaving a light, it's going to want to take off, and it's going to run, and it's going to run hard. That's just something to think about with the 120R engine because of that aggressive cam. But then again, that's nothing that can't be solved on a 120R with a simple cam swap. But then again, if you do a cam swap, you take out that high lift cam, you're not going to get anywhere near that 135 advertised horsepower. So no matter what you do with this motor, it is imperative to run a good oil cooler and try to get as much heat out of that engine as possible. Because like I said, this engine was designed for racing, meaning that it's meant to be fired up, warmed up, run down the drag strip, and then shut back off. This engine with its high lift cam, it may not perform as well as you would like in stop and go traffic, and that's why I say you're going to want to get the best oil cooler possible out there, maybe even a fan assisted oil cooler. Even with that Screamin' Eagle RX race kit, that's where we're getting a little crazy on the street. That's definitely not going to be too comfortable to ride on the street. It's going to produce a lot of heat, a lot of horsepower, which is great, but it's not exactly something that you'd want to be running in stop and go traffic, or maybe even trying to go cross country on. Now the 120R, I think it could do it. If you can handle the way the 120R is going to perform on the street, we're literally talking as soon as you let the clutch out of the light, this thing's going to want to run. It's not going to want to do a lot of low speed riding. It's not going to want to lug along. This engine's going to want to be wide open all the time. So if you're looking for more of a street engine, you might lean towards that 120 ST. Now I know they only advertise the 120 ST for mainly touring engines, but a lot of you guys out there that are pretty creative, couple of swaps, little tweaks here and there, you can pretty much fit that engine into anything you want. So after taking a look at the 120R, it's the same price as the 120 ST, but you don't get the induction system in it. So if you have a touring bike, it might be more to your benefit to get the ST out and then put a high performance exhaust system on it and see how it performs for you, and then you could upgrade from there. You could even put a more aggressive cam in it if you wanted and bump that power up more in line with the 120R. Now for you Dyna and Softail guys, we're kind of left out in the cold because they say the 120 ST only fits the touring models, but with a few modifications you could probably put that engine in anything you want. Now even with the 120R, if you do want that big cubic inch high performance twin cam in your Dyna and your Softail, you could change the cam out in it a little bit and try to level that power out a little more and get it to where it's a little bit more suitable for street riding. Because that's essentially basically what the cam does. The cam just decides where you have your power when it comes on. Well guys, that's all I've got for you this week. But if any of you guys are running a 120R and you're riding it on the street, let us know in the comments what you think about it. Be sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. That's a great way to support the channel. So until next week guys, dodge the cars, stay safe on the streets, and I'll catch you guys next week. Thanks for watching.